Arresting the Israeli prime minister? Is this for real? What's actually happening? It's triggered a power struggle between the feds in New York. Another topic is the second front in the Iran war, which is really striking at the core of the Iranian leadership. So what exactly does that refer to? Also, the Save America Act, the drums of war are beating, so can it push through at the final moment? This is another topic for our discussion today, along with many other important news items. All right, welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Fangway. Hello to our YouTube viewers, and hello to our listeners on Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Okay, let's get straight to the point. New York Mayor Mamdani claimed that if Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu comes to New York, he'll have him arrested. Of course, as soon as he said this, it caused quite a stir. The biggest question here is, can a city mayor in the U.S. arrest a foreign prime minister? Before answering that, let's look at why Mamdani wants to arrest Netanyahu. There are mainly four reasons. First, he believes a massacre of civilians occurred in Gaza, resulting in over 30,000 deaths, all ordered by the Israeli prime minister. So this is Netanyahu's what's called genocide. Second, New York City is the headquarters of the United Nations, where the General Assembly is always held. Netanyahu basically visits once a year. The soonest would be this September, when he'll come to New York for the high-level meetings of the 79th UN General Assembly and deliver a speech. So this falls within New York's jurisdiction. Third, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, in May of 2024, issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israeli Defense Minister Gallant, accusing them of involvement in massacres and persecution and so on. Fourth, of course, is that he's the New York mayor, right? If he enters my sphere of influence, I can use the NYPD to execute the ICC's arrest warrant and apprehend Netanyahu. Of course, this statement was quite shocking, but is it possible? Let me give you the conclusion first. It's completely impossible. Because, first of all, the ICC is an organization of 125 countries, established in 1998 under the Rome Statute. This agreement, it specifically targets state-level massacres and genocides that are otherwise unmanageable. But the U.S. is not a signatory, and neither is Israel. In the eyes of the U.S. government, the ICC is just an international organization that hasn't been authorized by the U.S., so it has nothing to do with us. And the arrest warrants it issues are based on its self-proclaimed authority. As for the crimes Netanyahu is accused of in these warrants, the U.S. and Israel completely reject them. They don't agree, and instead view it as a move driven by political ideology. Because at the very least, they didn't issue similar warrants for the Hamas leaders in Gaza, so it's actually an anti-Israel move. Second, a mayor, the New York mayor, can't just arrest people. No mayor in the U.S. has the power to arrest a foreign prime minister. The reason is that as the head of the executive branch, the mayor doesn't actually have the power to arrest people, because in the United States, an arrest warrant requires a prosecutor to apply for court approval. So a mayor can't just say, I'm the mayor, so I'm going to arrest someone. And thirdly, foreign heads of state enjoy automatic immunity in the United States. Even if they've committed a crime, they can't just be arrested, especially when the crime is disputed and might not even be true. So for these reasons, President Trump spoke out and said that if the Israeli prime minister comes to New York, he won't in any way, not in any way, shape, or form be arrested. There's no possibility of him being detained. This is basically a public slap in the face to Mamdani. Now, of course, in the United States, who's more powerful, the president or the mayor? Obviously, the president has more power. So if Mamdani actually dared to use the New York police to arrest the prime minister of Israel, then President Trump would likely have the authority to arrest the New York mayor. Okay, but even so, why would Mamdani say such a thing? Is he unaware of the facts I've mentioned? Of course he knows. So why? Because even though he knows it's impossible, why would he still say it? The reason is that during his campaign, he publicly promised that if he were elected mayor, then once Netanyahu sets foot in New York, and he knows Netanyahu definitely will, right? Since this is where the United Nations headquarters is located, then I will arrest him. So he made a promise he couldn't keep. So now he has to strike a pose and say these things. This is what many American politicians do, one way during the election and another way after. They'll say anything during the election just to get the votes. But can they actually follow through afterward? Well, I'll talk about his final stance in a bit. I think this is where President Trump differs from traditional American politicians. Trump basically tries to do whatever he says he'll do. So, back when he won the election in 2016 and started in 2017, everyone was a bit stunned. Like, how does this guy actually do what he says? Doing what you say you'll do, isn't that just being an honest person? Isn't that how it should be? But because Trump did it, he became a huge exception. It just shows that in politics, many people say things and then don't do them, making loud promises that then just vanish without a trace. This has become an increasingly normal phenomenon in the United States. Anyway, the result was that last night, from the night of July 21st to the 22nd, Mandani posted a recorded video on X, essentially admitting that New York City has no right to arrest Netanyahu, but he called on the federal government to join the International Criminal Court, to join that Rome Statute I mentioned, to execute this arrest warrant. This is all useless, right? In short, he's just given his voters an explanation, using empty words to settle things. Now, the second thing is that a senior official under New York Mayor Mandani tried to meet with Iran's representative to the United Nations in an official capacity, commonly known as the ambassador to the United Nations. And the result, what happened? The United States State Department found out and intervened, telling him to cancel it, and eventually it was canceled. So the background of this is that Mandani supports Iran and opposes Israel, which is well known. So he wanted to meet with someone. One of his officials was going to meet with Iran's ambassador to the United Nations. There was no public announcement about this. Instead, a local New York magazine called the City Journal checked the city government schedule. The calendar showed that his commissioner for international affairs, named Aquila, it was scheduled for July 7th at 11 a.m. at 2 United Nations Plaza, which is a United Nations building. There, he was to meet the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations. It was exposed, and once exposed, it became a major incident. The State Department directly sent a notice saying, "You cannot meet." Now, why couldn't they meet? Well, three reasons. First, regarding foreign diplomacy, including with Iran, falls under federal jurisdiction, not individual cities. Second, United States-Iran relations are in a state of severe tension, so meeting with Iran's United Nations representative at this time could give the adversary what you'd call a propaganda win. Third, this Mandani administration has had similar controversies before. In June of 2026, this June, Mandani had originally planned to meet with the president of Colombia, named Petro, who was in New York for the United Nations General Assembly. The State Department intervened then, too, forbidding the meeting. So what's the deal? Does a New York City official really need federal approval to meet a foreign diplomat? Actually, contact between New York City officials and foreign diplomats isn't rare in itself. But the key is the purpose of the meeting, huh? Usually it's about the diplomat's residence in New York, traffic, or security issues, city-to-city cooperation. Of course, private meetings are fine too, as long as they aren't official. But this time, this Al-Khalifi, it's Al-Khalifi, right? It clearly wasn't, Aquila's meeting was clearly official, not private. So that's why the State Department said you can't meet. This is official business, and you don't have the authority for this. But you might ask, what if New York just ignores them? What would happen then? If they don't listen, nothing much happens. But they still can't meet. Why? Because the federal government has absolute discretion over foreign guests coming to the United States. They could just block the United Nations ambassador from coming, see? Then they couldn't meet anyway. So it's basically like an egg hitting a stone. Later, Mandani claimed he didn't even know his subordinate, this Achilla, had arranged the meeting. He said, "I only found out when the media asked me." So first, it wasn't an approved diplomatic action, and second, it's not New York City policy toward Iran. So after the boss spoke up, the Commissioner for International Affairs canceled it himself. That's how it went. This involves a bit of common knowledge in the United States. Foreign affairs are a federal responsibility. The United States Constitution grants the federal government 20 powers, and one is diplomacy, military diplomacy, national defense, interstate trade and affairs, and international trade and affairs. These fall under federal jurisdiction. States and cities can't take them on, huh? So specifically, states and cities can't enter into foreign treaties. California Governor Newsom is a big supporter of, global warming solutions. So Trump has already withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement. He also quite frequently flies to various countries around the world to attend international conferences on global warming or what's called climate change. His participation in these meetings is itself a gray area because it carries a semi-official nature. But he can't sign any agreements. If he puts down a single word, it would be a violation of the U.S. Constitution. No state in the U.S. can sign any international agreement. Otherwise, it's unconstitutional. This point is very clear. For this reason, although Newsom flies all over the place, it's all just for show, you know. He hasn't dared to sign a single word anywhere, to sign anything on behalf of California. This is a settled matter in the U.S., not just by law, but by the Constitution. Okay, next, let's talk about what's called the double encirclement in the conflict between the U.S. and Iran. What's the situation? U.S. Treasury Secretary Besson came out with a revelation. He said that besides military strikes and oil blockades, we are launching a full-scale financial encirclement. Now, as everyone already knows, it's been announced that $130 million in cryptocurrency assets belonging to Iran's top leader, Khamenei, have been frozen. And the latest news is that he said, "We found the Ayatollah's frontman." What does Ayatollah mean? It means the religious leader of Iran. So we found the frontman for Iran's supreme leader. What does that mean? The Khamenei family actually controls a massive offshore financial empire, potentially worth billions of dollars, or maybe even more. This includes several luxury residences on what's called Billionaires Row in London. This real estate portfolio all belongs to the Khamenei family. Sometimes a single house is worth $100 million. So Iran uses oil on one hand to buy weapons. They use cryptocurrency to buy weapons and engage in militarism. On the other hand, their own family is frantically accumulating wealth overseas, reaching billions or even tens of billions. Actually, all dictatorial countries are like this, and Cuba is no exception. Even though Cuba is so poor it has nothing, with 4 nationwide blackouts already this year, the Cuban Communist Party privately runs a company to make money for themselves, and they're raking it in. This company is called GAESA, or GAISA. The full name of Giza, translated into English, is the Cuban Enterprise Management Group. It's actually a military business conglomerate controlled by the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces. It operates in Cuba's hotel and tourism industries, its ports and logistics, and especially the very open Port of Mariel, as well as supermarkets and foreign exchange stores all across Cuba and so on. I won't list them all. There's a ton. So Gaeza controls about 40% of Cuba's economy, maybe even more. It holds $18 billion in assets. So while the Cuban people live in poverty, these funds aren't being used to help them with food, medicine, electricity, or public services. Instead, it's kept in the Cuban leaders' own pockets for self-enrichment. That's why, for Cuba's rulers, as long as you don't overthrow the regime, nothing else matters. What if you blow up every bridge in the country? What if you blast all the people into, So what if they're dirt poor? You can still be like that leader in Cuba, sitting on tens of billions of dollars. Okay, so that's the situation. So this is the common trait of dictatorial countries, including communist ones. First, they pour money into military expansion to oppose America and the free world. Second, they call on the people to struggle hard. Third, they hide all the money for themselves. So now, Besson has found a key figure, and this key figure is a high-level frontman for Iran. This person's name is Ali Ansari. Ali Ansari. He's from one of Iran's wealthiest families. His business empire spans finance, real estate, steel, telecommunications, and the hotel industry. He's also the owner of Iran's largest massive shopping center called the Iran Mall, and he serves as a director for a well-known football club in Tehran. So he basically uses his status as a businessman to help the Khamenei family manage their offshore assets. So once they're identified, the concern is not knowing who's working for him, because Khamenei would never open an account overseas in his own name, right? It must be through some legal channels that no one knows about. Accounts opened by others, but all the money belongs to their family. So once identified and United States sanctions are applied, all these assets will be frozen overnight. So this is actually cutting off the Khamenei family's lifeline. Why? Because to put it bluntly, everything they do is for themselves. Regardless of country or religion, for the top officials of these dictatorial countries, the most important thing is themselves and their families. When their embezzled and hidden money is taken away, it's like cutting off their own lifeline. So this is what matters most to them. The CCP is actually the same. The money they hide overseas and the children and grandchildren they have abroad, that's their real, how should I put it, their red line. Their safety net, and all these places and things are in Western society. So if Western society decides to pull them out, they can do it in a heartbeat. So this is the Achilles heel of regimes like the CCP, as well as Iran, Cuba, and so on. Okay, another piece of news related to the United States and Iran. President Trump has spoken, saying he will soon strike Iran's heavily fortified Gotcha Sarin. That Gotcha Sarin, I mentioned it to everyone yesterday. There are two tunnels buried deep underground, located 2,000 feet, or 610 meters, beneath granite layers. You know, America's bunker busters are already impressive if they penetrate 100 meters, but this is 610 meters. It's believed that the interior likely houses thousands of uranium enrichment machines and uranium stockpiles. And IAE inspectors have been barred from approaching or entering this secret location. Meanwhile, Israeli intelligence says they have monitored Gaksarin for months or even longer, and determined it's one of Iran's key nuclear facilities which escaped the United States strike last June. Yesterday, in the Oval Office, during a visit from the Lebanese president, while meeting with Aoun and discussing the Iran issue, President Trump said, "We'll be hitting them very soon." Okay, so that's the situation. And President Trump said that if we hit them, they'll have no way to stop us. They're powerless against it. Of course, how the United States military would penetrate 600 meters of granite is another question. But the confidence President Trump showed still leaves us, well, waiting to see what exactly will happen. Also, United States Secretary of Defense Hegseth, during a Senate hearing, when asked, explicitly mentioned China, the CCP, and Russia. Helped Iran during the United States-Iran conflict. This was during his testimony yesterday before the Senate Appropriations Committee. When asked by a Republican senator about the roles of the CCP in Russia, he said they've been supporting Iran's activities to varying degrees. And as for the details, he said he couldn't disclose them. He went on to say, "We have many ways to deter them, but the depth and scope must remain confidential." He also noted that America's adversaries are cooperating for their own interests, challenging the United States across multiple domains simultaneously. He said the battlefield extends from the seabed to cyberspace, not just on the ground, not just in the air. Hegseth said they're sharing intelligence, combat capabilities, and technology, which has accelerated the pace of warfare. Meanwhile, another report says that Iran's air defense forces in Tehran no longer have any operational surface-to-air missile systems. Their S-300 systems are gone, all destroyed, so they have no way to intercept what's now flying over the Iranian capital, namely United States Air Force bombers. So now, Iran's air defense units are using anti-aircraft guns, firing into the sky. We know that Iran's anti-aircraft guns generally only reach 2 to 3 kilometers high. That's 2 to 3,000 meters. The very strongest ones, which are rare, can reach over 15,000 meters. But regardless, if a plane flies above 15,000 meters, it's a wasted shot. So Iran using anti-aircraft guns is like going back decades. The goal is simply to appease the regime's supporters and maintain morale, basically saying, look, we're still fighting. So it's a desperate act of firing into the sky with no hope of hitting United States bombers flying at high altitudes. Okay, let's look at this. President Trump had a landslide victory in last night's Arizona primary. Almost all the candidates Trump endorsed were elected. One particularly noteworthy winner is the former chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, the famous Tea Party leader, Andy Biggs. With President Trump's backing and endorsement, he easily secured the Republican gubernatorial nomination, leading his rivals, the other Republican candidates, by over 50 percentage points. Also, the former Pinal County Sheriff, Mark Lamb, is another candidate who has been endorsed by Trump and who recently won the Republican primary election in Arizona's 5th Congressional District. That's the same district that Representative Biggs is now vacating, leaving the seat open for a new representative to take over, to run for governor. So Sheriff Lamb is taking over that seat. Another one to watch is the far-left candidate, Newkirk, who in this primary is challenging the incumbent Democratic Congressman Stanton in the 4th District. So they hope to continue the path of the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, to seize power like a cuckoo in a nest. And the result? Well, the result was that they didn't succeed. So they've suffered a temporary setback. The so-called mainstream or moderate wing of the Democratic Party was still able to hold on to some seats and didn't let them break into Arizona. We all know they've already broken into New York and Colorado, including breaking into Massachusetts, as well as Illinois and Washington state. But this time, they didn't break into Arizona. President Trump also sent out a tweet, very happy. He said that we had a huge victory in Arizona. Of course, he was referring to the Republican primary. But he said that Arizona is becoming a red state, becoming a Republican state. We'll see what the results are after the elections this November. Also, there's a related situation, which is another highlight of this year's midterms. I briefly mentioned it to everyone yesterday. I'll repeat it again today because I've seen quite a bit about this in the American English news. Redistricting has indeed made it possible for the Republicans to gain about 12 more seats. Redistricting in Florida and Texas alone could give the Republicans 9 more seats. Redistricting in California could give the Democrats 3 to 5 more seats. So regardless, the Republicans won the redistricting battle. Therefore, the Democrats' hope of flipping the House in the midterms is, that plan is not easy at all. It's hard to guarantee they can win. And in the Senate, the Democrats' chances of winning are even smaller. So this is the current situation for the midterms 3 months from now. Okay, let's look at the Save America Act, which President Trump cares about very much. Now the drums of war are beating. This week, the United States Senate, the Senate has reconvened. The senators are starting to return. And now there's something very shocking that happened last night. The governor of New Jersey came out and said that in New Jersey, 6,600 non-citizens were mistakenly registered as voters. Before talking about this, let me give some background. The data found by the Department of Homeland Security is what? In New Jersey alone, over 35,000 non-citizens registered to vote. And that's just the ones who were caught. The real number will be many times that. This is what President Trump said in a tweet. And then, as a result, the Department of Homeland Security told these numbers to the governor of New Jersey. This is a Democratic governor. And then the governor, named Sherrill, he said that after receiving the notice last week, he immediately launched an investigation. It turned out that it was our state's Motor Vehicle Commission, the DMV, a software glitch that led to 6,600 non-citizens. When applying for a driver's license, they originally filled it out as non-citizens, but the program had a problem, a problem occurred, and mistakenly turned them into citizens. So he said he has already instructed to remove these mistakenly added non-citizens from the voter registration list. He said, although this mistake didn't happen during my term, accountability starts now. He said, this is what the predecessor did, and I'm taking action to prevent such incidents from happening again. But anyway, President Trump posted a tweet yesterday clearly saying, see, elections are unreliable. So also, President Trump reposted a small account this morning called Uncle Barney 1966. He wrote a whole bunch of things. I'll share the content and translate it for you to see. So President Trump reposted on X, wait, I misspoke. He reposted on Truth Social an article from X. What did it roughly say? He said, requiring the provision of U.S. citizen ID and photo ID to vote. This is a very simple thing. There's no reason to oppose it. Now, the only reason we're hearing is that it would involve more costs and add a burden to ordinary voters. They won't participate in elections because of it, so it will prevent more voters from participating. But this Uncle Barney said, every legal American has a birth certificate, and most have some kind of photo ID. Saying costs will cause problems and obstacles. He said they're all excuses, but he said, since that's the case, even so, let's make it 100% free. How about that? Republicans should include everything related to citizen ID in the bill, proposing congressional funding to make the cost of getting citizen ID and photo ID zero, funded by Congress. He said if people still desperately oppose such a simple bill when funding is in place, it clearly shows their attitude against democracy. He said, anyone still opposing wants to cheat. We must use all available legal means to remove them from elections and any role in the federal government. So Trump indeed reposted this tweet and agreed, saying, if you still oppose the Save America Act, you can't hold office in the U.S. How to achieve that is another matter. That's what Trump meant. So now Trump is posting several tweets daily to show his emphasis on the Save America Act. It's almost the last month or two. Whether it passes is now. So I've been telling you, the Save America Act isn't just a Republican agenda. It's the most fundamental thing for America. No matter who is in power, it must be guaranteed that elections can be trusted. Otherwise, the country won't be a country. The entire transfer of power in the U.S. is built on elections. When elections can't be trusted, what's left to talk about? Okay, next is another piece of news about Trump forcing pharmaceutical companies back to the U.S. What's the situation? We all know U.S. drug prices are the most expensive in the world. For the exact same drug, it's several times higher than in Europe, even over 10 to 20 times higher. The reason is Americans are just too rich. So drug companies like to set up factories abroad, then sell back to the United States at very high prices to make money so they can keep doing their R&D. Basically, it's like, they just rip off whoever they can. Past presidents haven't really dealt with this, but for Trump, it's been a top priority of his administration. So starting from, he signed an executive order just issued, effective August 1st of this year, stating that all generic drugs imported to the United States, what are generic drugs? They're common drugs, or more accurately, off-patent drugs. Those whose patents have expired, all generic drugs, they'll continue to be duty-free for now, but after 2 years, the tariff will be increased to 100%. So from now on, for 2 years, you can be duty-free. Then it's 100%. 100% for 1 year, and then it doubles, increasing to 200%. His goal in doing this is to force generic drug manufacturers back to the United States, and to punish those drug companies that, decide not to build factories in the United States within the specified time. President Trump said the purpose of this policy is to protect the American people. So regarding policies for patented drugs, brand name drugs, and innovative drugs, he said these have been very successful and will remain unchanged. We all know these drugs are also much more expensive than those abroad. So President Trump already introduced several policies on this last year, including what's called the Most Favored Nation Clause. Whatever price you negotiate with foreign countries, we in the United States must get that same price. They have to agree. So big U.S. states drug companies like Merck and Eli Lilly have already agreed, reaching an agreement with the federal government to no longer sell drugs to the American people at such extremely high prices. Okay, so now President Trump's final word is that United States pharmaceutical plants are being built on an unprecedented scale. That's the situation. All right, so I don't know how you all feel about this. Do you have any thoughts on the high cost of medicine in the United States? Actually, I don't have much of an opinion because I don't really take medicine, so I don't have much feeling about it. But if you do, feel free to share so we can understand what the situation is really like.